Hi whoever's watching. Now before you go any further, I think I need context for this video, so I suggest that you pause and watch the videos that are linked in the description, or the message that should pop up on the upper right side of the screen now. They are basically Tsuchiya using handbrakes on corners that really doesn't need handbrakes to tackle. He seems to use this handbrake techniques pretty often on medium-speed hairpins. I could insert the video clips directly into the video, but since I've already been noticed by the senpai at Kodansha who have so far let me off with nothing more than a slap on the wrist, I decided not to push my luck too much. I think that's enough explanation, so let's continue. No one can doubt Tsuchiya Keiichi's sheer ability to go quick in a car. He is not only quick in his AE86 on Toga, but he have no less than 2 24-hour of Le Mans class win title under his name, one of which was second place overall. And in that race he missed first place due to one of his teammates going rally crossing for a moment, collecting a puncture. So he is very quick. But his techniques that he himself promoted and or demonstrated in the videos is sometimes a bit questionable when it comes to the whole going fast department. Now before you come to my house holding pitchforks and tofus and contemplate where would be the best place to prop my lifeless head up so people can laugh, let's not forget that he drifted when he was so sure of his victory that he could afford to show off a little bit. And it had been demonstrated time and again that his famous, smokeless drift, is not necessarily faster than grip in most conditions. And this was already becoming true in the late 80s as you see on this table. Of course, we are not talking about drifts here. We are going to talk about handbrake. But nevertheless, it is an unorthodox technique. There are two big reasons why his unusual techniques are questionable. It is not simply because the anime series that were heavily influenced by him made these out-of-the-box techniques look faster compared to the boring, conventional grip driving which had been tried and tested. It's a bit more complex than that. One is that car suspension, electronics, and tire technology have evolved so much since the time when this kind of driving was genuinely the way to go fast. That's before when Tsuchiya made a name for himself with his Toga videos. Nowadays cars don't need pronounced rotation, an additional slip to go fast anymore. It has come to the point where if the car you're driving in has developed any sort of slide, you can safely assume that you are a few split-second decision away from a world of shit. The other, and the most important reason is the same reason why even the most professional drivers cannot drive like Michael Schumacher or Ayrton Senna or Sebastian Loeb. Their technique isn't difficult to understand in theory, but the talent and precision required to actually pull them off is simply out of this world, not to mention the literal neck-breaking amount of practice and professional dedication that made those techniques possible. This is a very real problem and you know it is true if you've tried. In the end, the answer to the question of whether Tsuchiya's Strats is practical or not, mostly boils down to the latter. When driving the cars from his time, the Strats of making the cars lose grip will certainly work to some degree, but they are extremely advanced techniques that are well out of the grasp of us normies, and may or may not work depending on where you drive, and when you use them. Now on top of all this, Assoluto Racing's car physics is quite limited. So it felt a bit strange that I am testing the handbrake technique in this game in the first place. Is it going to work at all? If it does work, then what's the point? Assoluto Racing has arguably the best grip and slip mechanics among all mobile racing games, but it is not a proper sim that is close to real-world driving. But I got a request, and testing this does solve one question I always had in mind. The handbrake button is removed in the weekly race event cars. So, the player have no choice but to grip drive the cars, whether it is a small drift track like Sportsland Yamanashi, or a proper circuit like Yamagata. So, what if we are allowed to use handbrake on these events? Should we use it? Of course, very specific circumstances like this. All this does give handbrakes a concrete advantage, but here we're focusing on driving on circuits and tracks like average people. Now, I have tried to answer this question before on Sportsland Yamanashi like a year ago with MR2 and 180 SX. You know, the hairpins there are pretty tight. But the end result wasn't an obvious victory for the handbrake like you would think. Using handbrakes resulted in slower lap times than the laps without handbrakes. That was every single time. It felt faster, but the lap times said otherwise. But now, the cars are different, and the game is different. We have newer tracks with hairpins of varying radius. It is tricky. Since I couldn't drive on Ebisu Nishi, I chose Ebisu Minami, Ebisu Drift Stadium, for Altezza. I drove Civic EK9 on Ebisu Higashi, using handbrakes on pretty much every hairpin there is. I also drove on Ebisu Kita in Civic EG6 just to get more samples for analysis. I tested 3 cars with no modded parts or upgrades: Toyota Altezza, Honda Civic EK9, and Civic EG6, all of which have low horsepower like the cars Mr. Tsuchiya used in the hot version video. I tested the cars, first with my usual tire setups and second with the default setups to see how they compare. Usually I fit less grippy tires in the back to simulate lift-off, oversteer and some other things when needed. Naturally, my usual tire setups would make the cars rotate more easily than default. Another difference I need to address is that handbrakes in real life are not magical drift initiator. I know, because I tried using them very irresponsibly on my cars. The stock handbrakes that comes with the cars are weak. What that means is that you can control the amount of lock you can generate if you adjust your pull. In the game, however, once you touch the handbrake button, it locks up immediately. So I had to be very careful. If you have watched the video, one of the race where Tsuchiya uses his handbrake is on wet surface. It is logical cause cars tend to understeer when the surface is slippery. So I hypothesized that my usual tire setups is normal weather and default setup is wet weather. I was originally going to test 10 laps each for both conventional driving and handbrake driving. But I had to put in more laps for handbrake driving because they were so hopelessly slow. As a result, I ended up driving from 30 to as many as 50 laps using handbrakes to get even close conventional grip driving. This is the oversteer setup I used for Toyota Altezza. Using conventional grip driving on Ebisu Minami circuit, I managed to set a fastest lap time of 40.198 seconds within 10 laps. Using handbrakes, 40.505 seconds was the best I could manage in 30 consecutive laps. I pulled the handbrake on every major bends. When I didn't pull the handbrake on this particular bend, I did do 40.093 seconds, needing around 20 laps to accomplish. What I do have to mention is that using handbrakes resulted in severely inconsistent lap times. Most of my grip driving laps did not exceed 41 seconds. On the other hand, using handbrakes often resulted in lap times exceeding 42 seconds caused by power sliding after handbrakes, or understeering off track. The key to speed was to pull the handbrakes when the car slowed down enough, and never let the car drift or power slide. So, what about default setups? Using conventional grip, I did a fastest lap of 39.725 within 10 laps. Using handbrakes, I did 39.494 in 20 laps. After learning my lesson, I did not use the handbrakes on this left-hander. Other than that, it was the same story. Using handbrakes did produce the fastest lap time, but required much more precision and finesse, therefore resulting in inconsistent lap times, and several off-tracks. Next, the EK9 on Ebisu Higashi. Traditional grip driving gave me 108.637 within 10 laps. I drove 40 laps around Higashi using handbrake technique, and the fastest lap was 109.280 seconds. On average, grip driving the EK9 was around a second faster than handbrakes. 1 second around a roughly 1 minute long circuit is a huge gap. Using grip driving, I was able to quickly build up my pace and maintain a good consistent lap time. On handbrakes, I could not find any consistency. I was wasting half of my laps understeering into grass, crashing into tire barriers, and generally not having a very good time. These are the lap times, side by side. It says something about the reliability of this special Strat, of Mr. Tsuchiya. Lastly, EG6 on Ebisu Kita. Ebisu Kita has even sharper hairpins than Ebisu Higashi, so I thought handbrakes could work to my advantage, but it did not. I first tested my oversteering setups. On the first 10 laps, the fastest lap time was 49.078 seconds on grip driving. When I used the handbrakes, the fastest lap time out of 20 laps was 50.053 seconds. On default setups, 48.535 seconds was the fastest lap time on grip. On handbrakes, 48.856 seconds was the fastest. The results on Ebisu Kita was quite surprising, because the tight consecutive hairpins is where handbrake techniques should shine, and here it did not work as well as it should. What I found out was that for consistency's sake, you should never use the handbrake strats on any cars, especially the front-wheel drive cars. The problem was that you bleed so much momentum and speed by sliding the car. And on front-wheel drive, all the weight including the engine is up on the front, so the front likes to follow the rear once it slides towards the outside of the corner. So if I miss the timing on my handbrake pulls by even a fraction of a second, the car is guaranteed to understeer wide. And you can't mash the throttle during that to make the car turn, because if you do, it will only exacerbate the understeer that is already happening, because all the torque that goes into front wheels will loosen up the front grip even more. Everything is pretty much against you. On grip driving, you don't have to worry about any of these. The car is slow, and you have all the grip you need. The Civic won't punish you with oversteer when you mash the throttle on the exit as long as you get the cornering speed right. Even if you misjudge the speed, you can simply ease off on the throttle and the car will stay on the track. So why did it not work? Is Tsuchiya Keiichi a hack? I do not think so. I am assuming Assoluto Racing's grip and slip physics may have worked against the handbrake technique. Like I said many times in my previous videos, our physics is a little bit skewed towards understeer, and the weight transfer under braking is toned down significantly. I am not saying that front-wheel drive understeering is inaccurate in this game, but the particular mechanic that helps players from crashing plays a role to make the handbrake technique ineffective to some degree. You can expect the car to make the corner when you turn the wheel as hard as you want and brake as hard as you want at the same time, unless you turn the abs off. This also makes trail braking so easy in this game, allowing grip driving to be so effective. In real life, you can understeer or oversteer quite easily if you don't time the trail braking just right. All of these factors combine to make the handbrake technique unreliable and ineffective. If you're going to use it, you need extensive tests to find out the corners where it would work to your advantage. I don't know. I only tested 3 cars on 3 circuits. Maybe the results would be different if you tried in different cars, or in a more serious sim racing games with proper setups. There are so many variables. All I can say that is it might work, or it may not. If you are still watching, I am really thankful. This video took a really long time to make. Please consider subscribing or better yet, donating a cup of coffee. The link is in the description. It would help tremendously. Last but not least, I love all you guys. Have a good day.